Hi, I'm pro saxophonist Jamie Anderson, and you're watching Get Your Sax Together, the home of free online saxophone lessons where you'll learn iconic riffs, become a better player, and just feel happier by enjoying your music more. On this week's show, I've never done this before, you are going to learn all about modes, what they are, and how you can apply them to your improvising. Let's go. So just before we get stuck into today's lesson, I've got some wicked resources for you. First of all, I've got a PDF, a free PDF for this lesson that you can see linked right there. And it's the Modes Handbook. It's got all the modes of the major scale, the melodic minor scale, the harmonic minor scale, diatonically and from a common root. You're going to find out all about that later, don't you worry. So go and grab your free PDF. This is your Bible of modes, and it's also got loads of other bonus features which I'm going to teach you about later. So make sure you go and grab that absolutely awesome resource. You can also go and do some research on the background to some of this harmony if it's a bit too much for you. The first is to go to my playlist about harmony and theory. That takes you from zero to hero. And when I say zero, I mean absolute zero. So you can work your way through these video lessons on harmony and get up to be an absolute hero. There's also a video linked up there now, which is called Chord Symbols Explained, which takes you through how you work out the notes of any chord symbol. That is an absolutely awesome resource as well. So 2 videos to watch and a PDF to download. You might want to print it out and follow along as we do this lesson. Now that you're all prepped up, let's get on and explore what modes are and how you can use them. Public health warning before we get any further into this video. This is a video for quite advanced students. If you're somebody who's just started or you just like jamming on a pentatonic scale, then yes, I salute you. You're brilliant. Just stick to your pentatonic. This will probably sound like complete and utter gobbledygook. Not all the videos I do are this advanced, and it is a bloody long video because it covers everything you're ever going to want to know about these modes and their usage when you're improvising. So just if you're one of my regular viewers and this is too much for you, many apologies. Hang in there. I'll get something a bit more down to earth next week. But if you're a real boffin, you are going to lap this up. In fact, it's going to go much further than anything you've probably ever seen on YouTube. All right, let's get into it. On Get Your Sax Together, I like to try and keep things as simple as possible and explain things from beginning to end so you can really get a handle on it without getting confused with all the jargon. So let's start at the beginning. What is a mode? Don't get confused. It's dead simple. You just take the notes of a conventional scale and then you start that scale on a different note. All we're doing is taking a normal scale and then starting on a different note and emphasizing a different note as your home note, as your bass note. Now this gives rise to 7 scales. The first scale is the major scale that we already know, and then the other scales will just go D to D with the notes of C major, E to E, F to F, and so on. That gives us 7 scales because there's 7 notes in a major scale. Now the first mode we already know because it's a traditional major scale. So that's one in the bag already. The second scale, by the way, all these modes, they've got fancy names. They've got fancy Greek names that I'm not sure anybody that I know can explain, but they're like Greek islands, you know, they all got really cool names. And some of them sound like superheroes. So the actual fancy name for a normal traditional major scale is Ionian. That's like an Ionian mode, okay? And then the second mode of the major scale, as we move up to the second note and start a new scale, that's called the second mode, is D, and it's D Dorian. Then we have E, Phrygian, F, Lydian, G, Mixolydian, A, Aeolian, and B, Locrian or Locrian. Locrian. So that gives us the 7 different modes of the major scale, and each one has a different set of intervals. What we're going to do is we're going to take the 1st, 3rd, 5th, and 7th notes of each mode, and that will give us a chord, a 7th chord. the variety of that seventh chord is going to change from mode to mode, as you'll soon discover. So, for example, here we go. On the Ionian mode, on the first mode of the major scale, you've got C, E, G, and B. Now, that's the first, third, fifth, and seventh notes of the major scale. That gives you a chord. Now, once you've watched my video on chord symbols, you'll understand that that is called a major 7 chord. Okay, that's C major 7. And then we do the same thing for all the other modes. On D, we get a minor 7 chord, D minor 7. On E, we also get a minor 7 chord. On F, the fourth mode, we get a major 7 chord again. On the fifth mode, on G, we get a dominant 7, or just a 7 chord. On the sixth mode, A, we get a minor 7 chord again. And finally, we get a bit of a weird one on the seventh mode. That bit is a diminished, and then you've got a flattened seventh, which gives you a half diminished chord. Okay, the last one is a half diminished chord, B half diminished, B minor 7 flat 5, you can call it. So that's what we get. We get a major 7, minor 7, minor 7, major 7, dominant 7, minor 7, and half diminished. So already we're starting to see this is quite cool, because whenever you see a D minor 7 chord, you're thinking, oh, that's the notes of C major. So it's starting to get useful. Let's now talk about the notes in between those 4 chord tones. Now, there's the root, or 1. If you go to 2, we call that the 9th. If you go to 3, 4, we call that the 11th. 5, 6, we call that the 13th. Now, why do we call them the 9th, 11th, and the 13th? Well, because if you keep going up the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 takes you to the root, 9 is the same as the second, 10, 11 is the same as the fourth, 12, 13, which is the same as the sixth. Right, now that we've explained that, we can start filling in the gaps. So we've got our basic chord types, and then the extensions in the middle are going to be filled in like this. So here's our C major 7, and you can see all the extensions coming up in brackets. So we've got a major 9th, normal 11th, and 13. Okay, now when we do the same thing going up to the next mode, the second mode, we get D minor 7 with a 9th, with an 11th, and with a natural 13. When we go up to the next mode, we have E minor 7, but this time with a flattened 9th, a natural 11, and a flat 13. So this is quite a dark mode, the Phrygian mode. The fourth mode, Lydian, you got a natural 9th, a sharp 11, and a 13. Now, when I say a sharp 11 or a flattened 9th, I just mean that, let's say we're in the key, we're doing an F major 7 chord here, and I said a sharp 11. If you did a normal F major scale, there would be a B flat in it. So we're raising the 11th, we're sharpening the 11th, and here's the important bit to remember, compared to the notes of the normal major scale starting on that root. I'll say that again because this is the really important bit. Let's say we've got this E minor 7 and it's got a flattened 9th. Why do we say flattened 9th? Because the 9th is flattened, get ready for it, compared to the note that it would normally be if you had a major scale from that root. Normally you would have an F sharp in E major, so we're flattening that, which makes it an F natural, okay? Right, back to the plot. So we've had our F major 7 with a 9, sharp 11, and 13. Now, here's G7, which has got a 9th, a normal 11th, and a regular 13th. Onto A minor 7, which has got a natural 9th, a natural 11th, but this time a flat 13. Just to re-emphasize this point, normally if you did an A major scale, you'd have an F sharp, but we've got a flattened 13, which makes it an F natural. And finally, we've got B minor 7 flat 5, B Locrian. So there's our B minor 7 flat 5, our half diminished, and we've got a flattened 9th, regular 11th, and flattened 13. So that's the extensions for all the chords that you get from the modes of the major scale. Now, when you're comparing all the different modes of the various scales, and later on we're going to get to the melodic minors and the harmonic minors as well, that's when things start getting really tasty. When we're comparing the different modes, there's a useful trick that we can do, which is to start each mode from a common root. Now, when I say a common root, just to keep things easy, we're going to start all the modes on C. Now, here's a C major scale. That's C Ionian, okay? So that's the notes of C major starting on C. Now, D Dorian, which is the second mode of the major scale, here it is. That's the notes of C major, but starting on D. That means that if you wanted to know what the notes of D Dorian were, you would find the major scale a tone lower, okay? So to get the parent scale of a D Dorian, you would use the notes of a major scale a tone lower. A tone lower than D is C, and it's the notes of C major starting on D. So by the same token, if you wanted to play C Dorian, okay, and here's C Dorian, you do the same thing. What are the notes of C Dorian? Well, it's the major scale, a tone beneath. It's the notes of B flat major starting on C. So now we can play C Ionian, then we can play C Dorian. Now, you just extend this all the way up. If you want to play the notes of C Phrygian, okay, you remember that E Phrygian is the notes of C major, which is a major third lower than E. So if you want to play C Phrygian, you have to play the notes of A flat major starting on C. And then you apply the same process to all the other modes. So if you want to play the next one, the fourth mode of the major scale starting on C, which is C Lydian, here it is. It's the notes of G major starting on C. And there's that nice sharp 11. We go to the fifth mode of the major scale, which is C Mixolydian. That is the notes of F major starting on C. And then the penultimate mode, which is Aeolian mode. Let's work it out together. If you're doing Aeolian, you use the major scale a minor third up. So if I want to do C Aeolian, I do the notes of the major scale a minor third up, which is the notes of E flat major. So I'm going to play the notes of E flat major starting on C. Here we go. So that is C Aeolian starting on C, obviously. And last but not least, if you're playing Locrian, you play the notes of the major scale a semitone above your root. Our root is C. We want to play C Locrian. So now we play the notes of D flat major. And that gives us all our modes from a common root. So here's C Ionian. Here's C Dorian. Here's C Phrygian. Here is C, here's C Lydian, thank you. Here's C Mixolydian. Here's C Aeolian. And here's C Locrian. Now, the next cool and useful thing we can do with the modes of the major scale is we can keep them all starting on a common root, as we've just discovered, but we can reshuffle the order and we can make the modes in perceived order of brightness or darkness. So the brightest mode of the major scale is the Lydian mode, and here's what C Lydian sounds like. And you'll hear this in movies all the time when things are bright and happy, and you'll hear it in, fanfares. Because it's a lovely, optimistic, bright sound. It's the brightest mode. It's got that really nice, sharp 11 in there. Then, the going in order of darkness, the next bright mode, the next darkest, I suppose you'd say, is regular old Ionian. So this time, that F sharp is going to turn into an F natural. And there's our regular major scale, okay? Interesting, isn't it, that the major scale that we know isn't even the brightest mode, even though you'd think the major scale can't be any brighter. The next darkest mode, we flatten the B to make it a B flat, which is a mixolydian. So the third one down the list in order of brightness to dark is a mixolydian. Continuing the process, have you started to see the pattern yet? Each time the mode gets darker, we flatten one note. First of all, we flattened the sharp 11, which is F sharp to F. Then we flattened the major 7 B to B flat. And this time, we're going to flatten the E to an E flat and give us Dorian, which is the next darkest mode. So whereas mixolydian, we had that E natural, now that E natural gets flattened to an E flat, and we've got the first minor chord. But as minor chords go, it's really quite bright, actually. And the reason is because of that natural sixth. And for those of you that know, the Miles Davis tune, So What? That's the mode that's used, Dorian. Okay, continuing the process, we're going to flatten one more note. Now this time, the natural sixth is going to be flattened to a flattened sixth. In other words, the 13 is going to be flattened. So now we get Aeolian mode. And that's what the Aeolian mode sounds like. You still got that nice natural ninth though. And there's a lot of pop stuff which is written in Aeolian mode. Right. Let's keep getting darker. Now things start getting really dark, and we're going to flatten the ninth, so that D natural that we had in Aeolian is going to be flattened to a D flat. So now we're in Phrygian mode. Now we're getting into that kind of more Middle Eastern Spanishy type sound. So film composers, for example, can use these modes to paint like they've got a palette of colours. So if the movie is getting into a darker phase, they can, switch to Aeolian. You can switch to Phrygian mode, which is this really dark and mysterious and almost sort of Spanishy sounding mode. It's really cool. Now, the very darkest mode of all is Locrian, the 7th one. And what we're going to do is, you guessed it, we're going to flatten the 5th this time to a G flat. Now we've got our Locrian mode, which is it's a funny old fish. There's a really, really tense intervals in that scale. Anybody that follows Adam Neely, he did a whole video where various composers had to compose using the Locrian mode, because it's a weird old scale to try and compose with. So that's a good video to go and check out. So that is the flattening one note each time and reshuffling these modes of the major scale in order from bright to dark. So one more time, I'll do it in quick motion. We've got Lydian to Ionian to mixolydian to Dorian to Aeolian to Phrygian to Locrian. Now what's interesting is going from the very darkest, which is Locrian, straight into the very brightest. It's like going from the darkness into the light. So that's a really cool way that we sometimes organize the modes of the major scale, which you can use as you're sort of painting different colors, from tense at the bottom to very bright and happy at the top. So using the tension within the scales that you get using a common root is a really cool way of using the modes if you're composing music or even if you're improvising. Okay, so if you're still with me, we've covered all the modes of the major scale. We've worked out what chords they give with what extensions. We've worked out how to arrange these modes from a common root, and we've then reshuffled them from bright to dark to compare what each mode sounds like. So far, really cool stuff. But let's move on, because there's not just the modes of the major scale, there's the modes of the melodic minor scale. Now, quick note about the melodic minor scale. In classical music, you play a melodic minor a bit weird, in my opinion, in everyone's opinion. You go up like this, and then you come down like this. But when you come down like that, which is with the flat 7, flat 13, and flat 3, all you're doing is playing Aeolian mode, aka the natural minor. So in terms of the modes, the descending version of melodic minor isn't any use to us because we've already got Aeolian mode. We've covered it. It's the 6th mode of the major scale. So we're only talking about the ascending version of the melodic minor. Now, a melodic minor is the same as a major, just with a flattened third. So there's a major scale. Here's a melodic minor scale. It's got the E flat in this case. It's a bit of a weird one because the bottom half is minor and the top half is major. So we're going to get some interesting sounds here. Now, because there's only one note different from the major scale, all the modes are going to be kind of similar to the modes of the major scale, but with one note different. But that one note can make quite a big difference. So let's go through the modes of the major scale. And the first mode, if we're going from C, is your straightforward melodic minor scale. Oops, my bad. Good job, my sax playing's a bit better than my keyboard playing. Right, now let's move on to the second mode, which is gonna, in this case, is gonna be C melodic minor starting on D, the second mode of the melodic minor scale. And it's called Dorian flat 9. That will be very obvious just shortly, because it's like a Dorian, but with a flattened ninth instead of a natural ninth. Moving on to the third mode of the major scale. This one is called Lydian augmented, because it's a bit like a Lydian scale, but with an augmented fifth as well. So here's the third mode of the melodic minor, which starts on E flat, Lydian augmented. You get some really cool scales out of the melodic minor. The fourth mode of the melodic minor scale is one which is super important for jazz. So prick your ears up if you're a jazz improviser, because this is one of the most important scales when you're improvising in jazz, and it's called Lydian dominant. So it's going to be, we're starting on F now, the fourth mode of C melodic minor. There's the sharp 11. And obviously it's called Lydian dominant because it's like a dominant Mixolydian scale, but with a sharp 11, which makes it kind of Lydian-ish. Right. The fifth mode of the melodic minor is called Mixolydian flat 13. And it sounds like this. I'm going to take it down the octave now. So a mixture there. You've got the natural ninth, but the flattened 13. Moving on to the sixth. Some of these are not going to be important, but we're going to cover that. I'm going to tell you which ones are important and which ones aren't after we've got all the modes together. So moving on to the sixth mode of the melodic minor scale. This is going to be starting on A. The notes of C melodic minor starting on A is going to be Locrian natural 9. Which is a Locrian scale with a natural ninth. Wow. How did they come up with these names? I think some people call that super Locrian. Do some people call that super Locrian? It's so confusing. Some people have different names for all these modes. I call it Locrian natural 9. And finally, now then, Oh, the 7th mode of the melodic minor. This is a weird old beast, but we're going to call it the altered mode, okay? So it's going to be, in this case, B altered, which is the notes of C melodic minor starting on B. Sorry. Again, I hit the wrong key. This is going to be a really important one for jazz as well. Okay, and we'll get into that later. So there's the 7 modes of the melodic minor. Let's now look at the chords and extensions that are produced from these 7 modes of the melodic minor, starting with C. Now that funny old chord, which you hear at the end of James Bond films with a 9th on it, I call it the James Bond chord. It's known as a minor major 7. So there's a minor, there's your major 7, minor major 7. And remember that video I told you to watch, chord types? That'll be covered in there. And you've got a natural 9th, natural 11, and natural 13. Moving on to the 2nd mode of the melodic minor, Dorian flat 9. You have a regular minor 7 chord with a flattened 9th, natural 11, natural 13. The 3rd mode, Lydian augmented. We have, now here's an interesting one. This is the first time we've had this. You have a major 7 sharp 5. In other words, like a augmented major 7 chord with a 9th, sharp 11, and 13. Moving on to the 4th mode. This is Lydian dominant. We start off and the bass chord is a normal dominant 7 chord. We have a natural 9, sharp 11, and natural 13. Mixolydian flat 13, which is the 5th mode. We've got a normal G7 chord. Then we have natural 9, natural 11, and flat 13. The penultimate mode, the 6th mode of the melodic minor, which is Locrian natural 9. Where are we? We're on A now. So we have a minor 7 flat 5 chord, and then a natural 9th, natural 11, and flat 13. This is all doing my brain in as well. And then finally the altered. Now, the altered scale and the chord that you get from this 7th mode, the melodic minor, is really one that does every music theorist's head in. So the easiest way to explain it is you have a flat 9 and a sharp 9, a natural 3rd. Stay with me on this. You have a flat 9, natural 9, regular 3rd, and then you have a flattened 5th and a flattened 13th. So really, it defies all kind of, categorization, because if you just played the chord like we've played the others, you'd have to call it a half diminished chord with a flattened 9th, flattened 11th, and flattened 13. But it's much more useful for us to actually call it a dominant chord with a flattened 13th and a sharp 9 and a flat 9 and a sharp 11. Oh, good old altered. It really does this every single time. Now, just like that we did with the major scale, we can put these melodic minor modes all from a common root. And if you go and get the PDF, all the modes of the melodic minor are listed starting on C as well. So make sure you go and check out that. And without further ado, let's move on to the modes of the harmonic minor. The modes of the harmonic minor. Let's kind of try and smash through these a bit. Before we even do it, I'll let you know that in the PDF, all these modes are listed from a common root of C, with all the chords and all the extensions. So it's the perfect reference guide for you to get to know some of these chords. Again, loads of these modes are very seldom, if ever, used. And once I've done these modes, I'm going to tell you the key modes that you need to know when you're improvising, and you can kind of ignore the rest, really. All right, so let's start with the first mode of the harmonic minor, which is the harmonic minor scale, which is the same as the melodic minor, but with a flattened sixth note. So that's a harmonic minor, just a regular harmonic minor scale, and the chord that you get is a minor major with a natural 9, natural 11, and I can't reach, flattened 13th. The second mode of the harmonic minor is called Locrian natural 13. So this is what it sounds like, with a little blip in there. Now that gives you a D minor 7, let's go down the octave. Oops. That gives you a D minor 7 flat 5, a D half diminished chord, which is then got a flat 9th, 11th, and natural 13. So that's a really weird vibe, that one. It's like a Locrian with a natural 13 and the flat 9. Do you remember the sixth mode of the melodic minor, we had a Locrian with a natural 9. Well, this one is with a natural 13. Moving on to the third mode of the harmonic minor. This one is called Ionian augmented. What do you think it's going to be? Could it possibly be an Ionian with a sharpened fifth? Totally. That's exactly what it is. Here's the scale. Ionian augmented. It's not called Ionian augmented for nothing. So here's the chord, which is a major 7 with a sharpened fifth, and then you have natural 11, natural 9, natural 11, natural 13. That's a bit of an odd fish, that one. Moving on to the fourth mode is called Dorian sharp 11. You could probably call this Lydian, Dorian, I don't know. It starts on F, and here's what it sounds like. Now, when you build the chord on that one, you get a minor 7, and then you get a natural 9, sharp 11, oh, I haven't got enough fingers, and a natural 13. The fifth mode of the harmonic minor. This is one which is really important in jazz. It sounds really cool when you play it on dominant chords. Some people call it a Phrygian dominant. Some people call it Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13. But it's the fifth mode of the harmonic minor. It sounds like this. And what you get is a G7. You get a dominant 7 chord with a flat 9th, a regular 11, and a flat 13. That's the extensions. Now, this is a really useful one for jazz, as we will soon discover. Moving on to the sixth, the penultimate mode of the harmonic minor is a Lydian sharp 9. It sounds like this. Really weird one, that. Now then, could this be a Lydian scale with a raised 9th? Yep, that's exactly what it is. So the chord that we get with Lydian sharp 9 is a major 7. In this case, A flat major 7. And then on top, you have a sharpened 9th, a sharpened 11th, and a 13th. That's the extensions. And last but not least, well, I say not least, it probably is least actually. It's a bit of a rubbish mode, this one. The seventh mode is called altered double flat 7. It's a bit of a useless one, this, a bit of a damp squib. So it would be, in this case, starting on B. And again, this is a really weird one. You have a diminished chord, and then you have a flattened 9th, you have a flattened 11th, and you have a flattened 13. We never use that one. If you want to play a diminished chord, you just use a diminished scale, but that's another story. So there are the seventh mode, the 7 modes of the harmonic minor with their attendant chords and extensions. Now that we've covered all that, let's get on to the juicy business of working out what are the important ones and what chords we can use these chords and scales on in a day-to-day improvising situation. Let's do that now. Okay, let's get on to the juicy stuff. If you've been paying attention, you'll realize that of the 3 different scale types, there are 7 different scales. So there's 21 different scales between the 3 modes. 21 different scales, 21 different chords and sets of extensions. So that feels like quite an overwhelming amount of stuff to learn. But what you're about to find out is that we don't use many of them. Okay, so to take away all the stress, have a look at this chart. On the screen, you can see that I've organized the modes of the major, melodic minor, and harmonic minor into columns, depending on the chord type. So the first column is major 7. And it turns out that there are 2, 4, 5 modes which have a major 7, okay? Or a major 7 with a raised 5th. So either a major 7 or an augmented major 7. When we move on to the dominant 7 column, you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different modes utilizing the dominant 7. On the minor category, we have 2, 4, 6, 7 scales as well. And in the minor 7 flat 5 or half diminished category, there are 3. Locrian, Locrian natural 9, and Locrian natural 13. However, the ones which are grayed out, you don't need to worry about them unless you're playing something very specific or some kind of slash chords or a complicated harmony. You're playing a Kenny Wheeler tune or something of that manner, or some weird modal tune. In your everyday use, you're only going to be looking at the orange scales. How cool is that? And there are 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11 scales to learn. The good news is you already know how to play your major scale. So that kind of leaves you with 10, really. Only 10 different scales to learn. Now let's make things even more simple. I'm going to go to the end column first. Let's look at that half diminished column. All you got to do is decide if you want the regular Locrian, when you're improvising in jazz, let's say, or you just got to decide if you want the regular Locrian or the Locrian with the natural 9. So if you're just doing, let's say, a minor 2-5-1 in C, so that's D minor 7, flat 5, G7 to C minor, you just decide if you want the E natural at the top, which is quite juicy, or if you want to do like a regular E flat on the minor 7 flat 5. So look, here's D minor 7 flat 5, okay? Going to G7, flat 9, going to C minor. Now, the juicy one is the Locrian natural 9, which is the one from the melodic minor scale. That sounds like this. Can you hear that? That's a really juicy note, which normally goes to the flat 13, which would go to the 9th. Or if you didn't want that juicy note, you'd have the flat 9. So, half diminished, easy. You just got to decide what you want to do with the 9th. Moving on to the majors, well, that's easy as well, because you just decide if you want the sharp 11. So if we're doing a 2-5-1 to C, there's a 2-5-1. And you just decide if you're going to go, or if you're going to go regular Ionian. So, half diminished, easy, one choice to make. Majors, easy, one choice to make. Let's now move to the minor column, to the minor 7 column. And that's easy as well. Whenever you're doing a 2-5-1 in a major key, you would use Dorian as a rule. You would, if you're resolving to a home minor key, so let's say we've got a minor 2-5-1 and we finish on C minor, you can choose if you want to have the melodic minor with that nice sort of natural 7 and 6th, which is quite a cool sound, or if you want to get the slightly more mysterious sound with the flat and 13th. So minors, easy. If it's a tonic minor, do you want the mysterious Aeolian, or do you want the kind of quirky and slightly brighter melodic minor? And if it's a 2-5-1, you just use Dorian. Right. So far, that's 3 columns out of the equation, and all the action is now going to happen in the dominant 7th column. And I've got a separate chart for this. This is where the really cool stuff starts to happen. Let's check it out. So once you strip away the dominant 7th modes that we don't really use that much, we're left with 4 modes, which are derived from the major, the melodic minor, and the harmonic minor. Those 4 modes are Mixolydian, from the 5th mode of the major scale, Lydian dominant, which is the 4th mode of the melodic minor, altered, which is the 7th mode of the melodic minor, and Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13, aka Phrygian dominant, which is the 5th mode of the harmonic minor. We've got 4 different chord and scale options whenever you see a dominant 7 chord. How do you know which one to choose? Right, that depends where that dominant 7th chord is resolving. And there's 7 common ways that dominants resolve. This is all covered in a bonus section of Improvisation Mastery, so I can't spend too much time telling you about how dominants resolve. This video is already massively epic. So just take it from me that these are the choices you need to make. Now, interestingly, the most traditional one, which is resolving just, 5 to the home key, you can use probably 3 of those choices. You can use good old Mixolydian. You can use altered, which is going to kind of give you that sound. I'm sure you're familiar with that sound. And the Mixolydian flat 9, 13, which kind of sounds like this. And you'll hear that quite a lot in jazz. So 3 different choices there. Moving on to the second way dominants resolve. They resolve to a minor key. So you got 5 going to a minor instead of a major. Now you would only ever really use altered or Phrygian dominant. Okay, so the altered is going to sound like this. That sounds cool. And the Phrygian dominant is going to sound like the one I just played, except going to a minor. So it sounds like this. There's your basic G7 and really nice. The third way that dominant 7ths resolve is down a semitone, and this is usually a tritone substitution. So if you normally have G7 going to C, you would have D flat 7 going to C, and on that D flat 7, you would use the Lydian dominant. Okay, you'd use the Lydian dominant on that. Resolving home. That's the only real choice you do on when you're resolving down a semitone. On to number 4, which is resolving up a semitone. This is sometimes called the tonic diminished for reasons that I can't go into. Whenever you resolve a dominant up a semitone, you tend to use Mixolydian flat 9, flat 13. So, for example, if you had a B7 resolving up to C major 7, you would use the Phrygian dominant on the B7, okay, which it turns out to be an E harmonic minor scale, and it would sound like this, which resolves nicely to C major. Moving swiftly on, you have dominants that resolve up a tone. Okay, not up a semitone, but up a tone. And this is what you might get in what's called a backdoor 2-5-1. So you're in C and you've got F minor 7, B flat 7 going to C. And on that B flat 7, you would use a B flat Lydian dominant. All right, so there's F minor 7, B flat 7. You would use the sharp 11, 13, sharp 11, 9 on that B flat 7 chord. So the B flat Lydian dominant, okay, resolves up a tone. Now, if you're going up a tone to a minor key, then you would just use good old Mixolydian. So if it was F minor 7 and you're going B flat 7, it goes back to C minor that way because there's a few more notes closer to C minor in that scale. And on to the last one, which is when you're resolving to a minor chord with the same root. Now, this is, for example, you have D7, okay? Let's say you're in the key of C, right? You've got a D7 chord which changes into a D minor 7 chord, right? That happens in standards all the time. Now, when you do that, you use Lydian dominant. So here's your C major, you go to D7, which is called the secondary dominant, and you use D Lydian dominant, which sounds like that. Okay, and the reason you do that is because this G sharp goes up nicely to the A when you resolve it. So let's do that example one more time. C major 7, you go to the secondary dominant, which is D7. Okay, there's the Lydian dominant sound, which goes to D minor 7. So that is the 7 ways that dominants resolve and the modes that you would use to make them all work nicely. And that is all in that PDF, the Modes Handbook, which is free for you to download. Woo! That is a serious amount of information to absorb. My God. Wow. Once again, I've gone completely epic, even though I promised that this video is going to be much shorter. I lied. So that's everything you're ever going to need to know about the modes of the major, melodic minor and harmonic minor scale, what chords and extensions you get, and what chord symbols you can use these different modes on, the ones which are commonly used, and the different options you've got on dominants depending where that dominant resolves. Woo! As usual, if you're even still here, thanks very much for watching. We'll get something a bit more basic going next week, I think, don't you? You can, of course, buy me a coffee if you're getting good value. And, you know, to tell you the truth, you've just got a music college level education into the modes and their usage and the way dominants resolve. You could sell this as an entire course. So pretty bloody good value, I'd say. Don't forget to get the PDF, which you can use by clicking the link in the description. You can see the URL there. And until next week, where we'll do something a bit easier, I encourage you to practice hard, practice smart, and don't get too bogged down in the theory. Enjoy your music. See you later. And then the extensions are natural 11. Yeah. Wow. Huh. Okay, let's start again.